I still remember the moment I realized my wedding day was about to become a living nightmare. I had spent months dreaming of a perfect day, an elegant celebration of love, with friends and family gathered around me. Everything was planned to perfection, from the soft pastel decorations to the exquisite menu. I was radiant in my wedding gown, and my heart was full as I stepped into the reception hall. That is, until the night took a dark turn that I could have never foreseen. I had always known that my mother-in-law had a cold, calculating streak beneath her polished exterior, but I had also hoped that, on my wedding day, any lingering resentment or jealousy would be swept away by the sheer happiness that love brings. My husband, the man I thought I knew so well, had chosen me over his mother, and that decision was something his mother had never fully accepted. Throughout the months leading up to the wedding, I picked up on subtle hints of disapproval, a curt remark here, a half-hidden smirk there, but I always convinced myself that it was merely her way of being concerned for him. I never imagined that her disdain would manifest in something so vile. After the ceremony, I eagerly anticipated the reception. I was ready to laugh, dance, and celebrate with everyone who had supported our union. A few moments into the festivities, I accepted a drink from what I assumed was a well-intentioned server. The cocktail was delicious, its flavor both refreshing and indulgent. As I mingled with guests, a strange heaviness began to cloud my thoughts. I felt dizzy and my vision blurred. The room, once filled with the joyful chatter of loved ones, began to spin. I reached out for something to steady myself, but my limbs betrayed me. Within seconds, I blacked out. I woke up later, sprawled on a plush sofa in the reception hall, my head pounding and my body trembling as if it had been through a war. The room was in disarray. The music was off, and my husband's friends whispered in hushed tones as they tried to make sense of what had happened. I could see concerned faces and hear murmurs of shock and disappointment. For a few moments, I was lost in a haze of confusion and pain, physical and emotional. It was then that I pieced together the horrifying possibility. Someone had tampered with my drink. As I struggled to regain my composure, a flood of emotions overwhelmed me: fear, anger, and betrayal. I remembered a recent heated conversation with my mother-in-law, whose tone was as icy as the champagne that had flowed earlier. The whispers of suspicion grew louder as fragments of recollections from earlier in the evening surfaced in my memory. I recalled her lingering near the bar, her eyes fixed on me with a look that suggested she was savoring my misery. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She had spiked my drink, and in doing so, she had ruined one of the most important days of my life. The aftermath was a chaotic mess. Guests tried to piece together the timeline of events, and my husband, ever the mediator, attempted to smooth over the situation as best as he could. But his efforts did nothing to erase the humiliation and betrayal that I felt deep in my bones. I felt exposed and vulnerable, betrayed not only by my mother-in-law, but also by the man who had chosen her side over me. In that moment, I knew that forgiving her was out of the question. I was not the type to let someone get away with such a malicious act, especially on what was supposed to be a celebration of love. As the reception limped on, I retreated to a quiet corner of the hall, steeling myself against the sympathetic glances and awkward silences of guests. I couldn't help but overhear hushed conversations among family members, many of whom were torn between loyalty to my husband's side of the family and their own sense of right and wrong. Every whispered word felt like another betrayal, confirming my worst fears. My life had just been turned upside down by someone I had never truly trusted. The next day, amidst the wreckage of shattered dreams and broken promises, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law. Her tone was feigned calmness as she offered me a check for $5,000, a sum meant to compensate for the embarrassment and trouble I had been forced to endure. According to her, my husband had made his choice, and now it was up to me to decide if I wanted to accept her money and move on. I listened to her words in a state of numb disbelief, my mind reeling with anger. The idea that she could reduce her betrayal to a simple transaction was infuriating. I refused to be placated by money, and I refused to forgive a woman who had deliberately sabotaged my special day. That call marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter in which I vowed to reclaim my power and exact a measured, calculated revenge. Over the next few weeks, as I grappled with the fallout of the wedding disaster, I began to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding that fateful evening. I discreetly reached out to a few trusted friends who had been present at the reception. Their accounts, combined with subtle hints I'd picked up before the incident, painted a clear picture of betrayal. It was evident that my mother-in-law had long harbored resentment towards me, and her actions were a premeditated attempt to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. One evening, I sat alone in my quiet apartment, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. I stared at the check she had sent me, its crisp paper mocking me with its false sense of apology. I knew that accepting the money would be tantamount to forgiving her, a notion I could never entertain. Instead, I began to formulate a plan, one that would serve as a final and unambiguous lesson in the consequences of betrayal. I started by gathering evidence. I went through every detail of the wedding day, meticulously noting every moment that now served as a reminder of her treachery. I contacted the bartender, who confirmed that my drink had been tampered with, and I preserved text messages and voicemails that hinted at her hostile intentions. The more evidence I collected, the clearer it became that she had orchestrated the entire debacle, not only to ruin my wedding, but also to assert her dominance over my husband's choices. Armed with the undeniable truth, I decided to confront her, but not in a way that would simply rehash the past. I planned a counterstrike that was as precise as it was elegant. My revenge needed to be both satisfying and irreversible, a message delivered with the cold precision of a masterstroke. I crafted a letter addressed to her, a letter that laid bare every transgression, every malicious act that had turned what should have been a day of joy into a bitter spectacle of deceit. In the letter, I recounted every detail of that night, the way I felt, the betrayal I experienced, and the undeniable proof of her sabotage. I made sure it was unyielding, leaving no room for reinterpretation or apology. After I sent the letter, I began to spread the truth in subtle yet far-reaching ways. I reached out to key members of our social circle, trusted family friends, who had been privy to the dynamics of our relationship for years. I ensured that every detail of my ordeal was known, from the subtle manipulations leading up to the wedding to the deliberate act of spiking my drink. I wanted everyone to see her for who she truly was, a manipulator willing to stoop to any level to exert control and inflict pain. I wasn't seeking public humiliation for its own sake. I simply wanted the truth to be known so that no one else would ever fall victim to her toxic influence. In the weeks that followed, the effects of my revelations began to manifest. Conversations and family gatherings turned tense whenever her name was mentioned. Mutual acquaintances who once spoke of her in glowing terms now exchanged skeptical glances and cautious remarks. My husband, who had always seemed caught in the middle, began to distance himself from her influence as the evidence piled up. It wasn't long before the consequences of her actions began to ripple through our family. I wasn't interested in a messy divorce or a dramatic public feud. I simply wanted to reclaim the dignity that had been stolen from me that fateful night. I started to rebuild my life piece by piece, refusing to let the incident define me. I sought out therapy to help process the emotional scars and to rebuild my self-worth. I immersed myself in my work and the hobbies I had long abandoned, determined to rediscover the passion and joy that had once lit up my life. Every step I took was a step away from the betrayal and a step toward reclaiming the person I was meant to be. As time passed, the wounds began to heal, though the scars remained as a constant reminder of the treachery I had endured. My mother-in-law's attempts at reconciliation, including the $5,000 check and repeated apologies, fell on deaf ears. I made it clear that money could never replace the trust and respect that she had so callously shattered. Every interaction with her became a lesson in boundaries and self-respect, and I found solace in the fact that I had taken control of my narrative rather than allowing her to dictate it. One particular encounter still burns in my memory. I was attending a small family gathering, one that my husband had reluctantly agreed to attend in order to keep up appearances. The atmosphere was tense, and I could feel the unspoken animosity between me and my mother-in-law like a heavy fog in the room. As we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I noticed the subtle glances exchanged between her and a few other relatives. They all seemed to be silently acknowledging the truth that I had so painstakingly revealed to everyone who cared to listen. When she finally tried to make a feeble, conciliatory remark about the good old days, I calmly reminded her of the events that had transpired on my wedding day. My voice was low and measured, each word deliberate and final. I told her that I would never forget, and I would never forgive. That night, as I left the gathering with a quiet sense of vindication, I realized that my revenge was complete. not through grand gestures or public spectacle, but through the quiet dismantling of her carefully constructed facade. In the months that followed, I found strength in the knowledge that I had stood up for myself. I began sharing my story in online communities where others who had experienced betrayal could find solace and understanding. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Strangers wrote to me, thanking me for exposing the truth and encouraging me to continue living my life on my own terms. Their words reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my experience, as painful as it was, had a meaning and a purpose. I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, and my journey toward healing was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. There were moments of quiet reflection, times when I revisited the details of that dreadful night in my mind. I analyzed every conversation, every look, searching for clues I might have missed. I realized that my mother-in-law's actions were not the result of a momentary lapse in judgment, but of a long-standing desire to control every aspect of my life, even on the day that was supposed to be mine. The betrayal stung, not only because of the physical danger I had been put in, but because it was a violation of the trust that is supposed to be the foundation of any relationship, especially within a family. I resolved then that I would never allow anyone to undermine my self-worth again. Even as I moved forward, I made sure that the memory of that night served as a warning to anyone who might try to cross me in the future. I cultivated a reputation for being unyielding when it came to protecting my own interests and the interests of those I loved. I wasn't interested in reconciliation or compromise with someone who had once tried to destroy me, and I made that abundantly clear in every interaction. My mother-in-law's offers of money, her pleas for forgiveness, were met with a cool indifference. I had learned that some wounds are too deep to heal with mere apologies or financial compensation. The final chapter in this saga came unexpectedly. My husband, torn between the two women who had defined so much of his life, finally took a stand. In a quiet, private conversation, he told me that he could no longer live in the shadow of his mother's manipulations. His words were measured and sincere, and while they couldn't undo the damage that had been done, they helped me to finally see that I was not alone in this struggle. His decision to distance himself from her toxic influence was not only a victory for our marriage, but also a signal that I had won a moral victory over the forces that had once threatened to consume me. Now, whenever I reflect on that chaotic day, I feel no regret, only the resolute determination to protect my dignity and the unyielding conviction that I will never be a victim again. The betrayal of my mother-in-law remains a painful memory, but it is also a source of strength. I have emerged from the ordeal with a newfound clarity and an unshakable resolve to live my life on my own terms. The scars may never fully fade, but they are a testament to the battles I have fought and the victories I have won. I share my story not to dwell on the past, but to serve as a reminder to anyone who has ever been betrayed that revenge, when carried out with cold precision and unwavering resolve, can be a path to reclaiming one's life. I have learned that forgiveness is not always necessary, especially when the betrayal is so profound that it cuts to the core of one's being. My mother-in-law may still try to reach out with money or hollow apologies, but I have long since drawn the line. My future is not defined by her actions, nor is my worth measured by her attempts to manipulate the narrative. I am the architect of my own destiny, a destiny built on strength, honesty, and an uncompromising commitment to justice. In the end, my wedding day will always be marred by the memory of that fateful incident. Yet, through it all, I have grown stronger. I have learned that the most powerful revenge is not one that destroys an enemy, but one that transforms a victim into a survivor. I refuse to let betrayal define me. I stand as living proof that even in the darkest of moments, there is a light that can guide you toward a future free of regret and full of empowerment. This is my story, a chronicle of betrayal, survival, and the quiet triumph of standing up for oneself. I share it in the hope that those who have experienced similar injustices will find the courage to reclaim their power. To my mother-in-law, I say this: your attempt to ruin my life has only made me stronger. I have built my own fortress out of the remnants of your treachery, and in doing so, I have ensured that your cruelty will never again cast a shadow over my life. I will continue to live my life with the full knowledge that I have overcome a betrayal that many would have allowed to destroy them. My journey was not an easy one, and the scars are a permanent reminder of the night when everything changed. But I embrace those scars as symbols of my resilience and the unwavering belief that I deserve nothing less than a life defined by truth, respect, and an unbreakable will to succeed. In sharing this tale, I hope that anyone who reads these words finds solace in the knowledge that even the most harrowing betrayals can lead to a rebirth of strength. I refuse to let bitterness consume me. Instead, I let it fuel my determination to move forward and never look back. The events of that wedding day have become a part of my past, a past that I have learned from and grown beyond. And while I will never forget the pain of betrayal, I will always remember the empowering moment when I decided to reclaim my destiny, with every step of my journey proving that I am the master of my fate, and no one will ever rob me of that truth again. My revenge was not a moment of explosive anger or public spectacle, but a quiet, deliberate assertion of my right to control my own narrative. I stand here today, scarred but unbroken, as a testament to the fact that when you choose to fight back against injustice, you pave the way for a future where you are never again defined by someone else's cruelty. I forged my own path, and with each step, I left behind the shackles of betrayal, determined to live a life that is all my own. The journey was arduous, but it was mine, and in that journey, I discovered that true strength comes from within. Every day, I wake up with a clear mind and an unyielding resolve, knowing that I have overcome the darkness that once threatened to consume me. I choose to look forward, to embrace the beauty of life, and to never allow anyone to undermine my worth again. My wedding day may have been tarnished by deceit, but the future I now build is filled with promise and an unwavering belief in the power of self-respect. This is my victory, a quiet, unassailable triumph over betrayal, one that will serve as a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever been wronged. I leave you with this final thought. Never allow anyone to dictate the course of your life. In the end, the only person who has the power to define you is yourself. I chose to rise above the betrayal, to confront it head-on, and in doing so, I reclaimed not only my wedding day, but my very soul. My story is one of survival, of a slow and deliberate revenge that was more satisfying than any fleeting moment of anger could ever be. And though my mother-in-law may continue to offer her hollow apologies and attempts at restitution, I have long ago moved past the need for forgiveness. I have learned that some wounds are too deep to mend, and sometimes the only just response is to forge ahead, stronger and more determined than ever. This is the legacy I now carry, a legacy built on the foundation of resilience, truth, and an unyielding commitment to never be undermined again. My life is mine to live, and no act of betrayal will ever change that.